Parminder, thanks for your presentation. I think it was a little easier than listening to Jeff, actually.
Okay.
So that was good. I wish I had my glasses, though, there's so many I could follow those lines. What you put about the conference presidents, Jeff says there's some other enemies within present truth, but you didn't bring those up there. He puts it in exactly the same place that there's two. Where you've got the conference presidents, he says within present truth there's some other enemies, but you didn't elaborate on that.
You noticed.
Yes, I did.
The reason I didn't, it wasn't really for expediency, because I wanted to draw out some other points, because I wanted to focus upon the midnight cry and the time period that's in this issue, based upon these truths. But Ellen White and the pioneers identified that in this history here, let me draw it maybe a bit clearer here. Between April 44 to August 44 to October 44 to August 40, they're very clear that in this time period here, there was no fanaticism, and that in this time period here, there was no fanaticism, and that in this time period here, there was fanaticism. And they identify that the fanaticism stopped when the Exeter Camp meeting occurred and God's people were coming into a unity of understanding. And so if we're going to line up this history, we know that this is 9/11. We also know that this is 9/11. So I hope people can see that this is 9/11, because it comes down here at 9/11, but this, because the second angel comes down, is also 9/11. This is the midnight cry, and this is the Sunday law. And this is a tarrying time. So in the tarrying time, there's fanaticism. And I've already identified that this history here is the history of the 10 virgins, or the Millerites, which essentially translates to those of us who are on this message. If you go back and even just conceptualize why that would be the case, it's because in this history here, there was no fanaticism, because everybody was on the same page. Everybody had a common understanding of what truth was. They had direction, they had dates, they had history. There wasn't room for varying views. And I don't mean some minor issues upon who a particular king was, or whether it was, 1456 or 1457, according to the best chronologies. They had a clear understanding in the mission that things were going to happen in 1843. They had a start date, they had an end date, there was clarity and unity. Once the midnight cry happens, in this time period here, the same dynamics that existed here occur here, because now everybody understands it's the autumn of 1844, and there's no room for varying views on that issue, because there's an overwhelming amount of evidence, and on top of that, the Holy Spirit is driving this movement and this message, and so there isn't any maneuver that someone could say, well, maybe it's in 1856, because there would be no basis for that. But in this time period here, when they're in a tarrying time, because they come to a point where they no longer have a direction, they no longer have an end point, people are coming up with varying views of what is correct and what is incorrect. So we can understand the fanaticism in that light, that it's in this time period that we don't have clear direction, clear information of when this event's going to happen. So, if we were to mark this as July, here, we know at this point here that the message begins to be solidified again, and people start coming back on the narrow path, on the platform, whatever imagery you want to get to, and by August, those people who have not accepted this truth for whatever reason, they come off the message. These are the foolish virgins, and the parable explains what happens to them. They go out into the wicked world. And all you have left at this stage here is essentially the wise virgins. Now, I know in real life it's not that straightforward, there are some complexities to it, but I'm just giving it with the language of the parable. So that's what I understand that this fanaticism is dealing with. It's all the varying views on many different issues that an argument is occurring over because people have lost direction, because the Lord has not revealed that information to us. But as you get to August the 15th, as soon as you get to this date, from July onwards, there's more and more clarity of what's going to happen. So, for instance, if we were to talk about the attack that's occurring here, if we came to the conclusion that there was an attack here being marked by a decree, there was a decree here which Sean's identified that you can't actually prove, but I think, the way I see it, that there's enough markers to show that there was, and we're expecting one here. This kind of information, if in a group like this, and worldwide, people were beginning to see, then there would be unity coming back into the ranks, and people would be starting to see that there's direction, there's a focus, people are understanding what's happening. And all of that information is based upon Ezra 7:9, first of the first month, fifth of the fourth month, first of the fifth month. And once this understanding starts to happen, we understand the development of the priests and the Levites, and then a lot of clarity happens. So as an example, I know in Sabbath school there was a major discussion about how we're supposed to interact and interface with the church. So when we had that discussion, I know it wasn't exactly at this level, my understanding is not so much how we interact with the leadership of the church, but with the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Those people, those 7,000 who haven't bowed the knee, but are hidden. How do we go about getting them on this message? So I know there's this struggle, everybody's had this struggle in the past, about do we go to the churches or do we wait? Do we stand, if you want to view this, at the River Jordan and wait for the Holy Spirit to direct them to come out to us, and then we might argue, well, that's not an effective way of evangelizing, so we need to go in there and do an effective work there. So those kind of discussions have gone on for a long time. But if we understand that the first fruits are in a two-step process, as an example, that first is the priest and then the Levites, we know in the ministry of Elijah that God is already working upon the heart of Elisha. We can see that by the ploughing that he's doing. So we know that when we see a ploughing, it's indication of preparation work that's being done before you sow the seed and you get a harvest. So in the imagery of Elisha, while Elijah's doing his ministry, Elisha is busy ploughing. So I understand the symbology of that to mean that the Holy Spirit's working upon Elisha while Elijah is doing the work. Elijah hasn't had any interaction with Elisha. So as soon as Elijah comes to Elisha and he says, "Follow me," Elisha knows what to do straight away. And I'm marking that at this point here. So Elisha's now going to begin his ministry, but the Lord's been working on him before that. If you can see that there's a priesthood and a Levites, we read from Ezra that the priests are ready here, but the Levites aren't ready. So the question is, who's going to get the Levites ready? So if there's any light or truth in this, we would know that the thing that's going to draw the Levites in full measure, it's going to really draw them out. The thousands, the 7,000 compared to one that are in the Adventist church now, is going to be this. I'll bring it here. Is the living testimony. It's them seeing Christ in us. And this is identified by the marriage. So there's an issue of marriage that's going on here. This living testimony. But if you go back to Millerite history, this living testimony is not going to occur anywhere prior to this. It occurs at this event. For sure there's some increase, there's some progression, but it's at this point that it's marked. So, to a certain degree, because of the fulfillment of prophecy, if we're expecting large numbers to come out of the churches in our present condition, I don't mean our present sinfulness, I mean in our present prophetic condition, I don't think it's going to happen. And if that is correct, and we saw that there's first this stage and then there's this stage, maybe we'll adjust the way we see things. So the reason why I mentioned that was to go back to this issue of fanaticism. From last year, when these truths started to be brought to the surface, we have a clearer understanding of how this message is going to be developed down to the close of probation here. And if it is true, then we're now beginning to get back direction. So before, people would say, well, how are we going to save all those people in Adventism? What methodology, what technique should we use? Where did the 144,000 formed from? Is it a literal number? Is it symbolic? Because there's only a couple of hundred people on the message at the moment. And how are we going to get all the thousands of Adventists to join us? What's the dynamics of all of that? But if this is correct, then you can begin to see, and more lights I'm sure are going to come to us, that some of those questions can be explained. So the differences in opinions, which I'm identifying here as fanaticism in this history, melt away. They don't melt away because we treat each other better. They melt away because our prophetic understanding becomes clearer. And that's identified in the story of Christ, when on the day of the first fruits of Resurrection Day, he breathed upon his disciples, and they had 40 days of preparation. Those 40 days of preparation are typifying this history here, and that's a prophetic preparation. They understand prophecy clearly, and they come together on prophecy. It was mentioned earlier in Sabbath school, even after that day, people had a lot of hang-ups about a lot of things. But one thing they did understand is that prophecy was correct, and there wasn't any fanaticism on that issue. So by the time you get to Pentecost and the outpouring happened, the reason they're all in unity and on one mind is one mind on a prophetic message. And so there's no fanaticism shown in that history there. So that's kind of how I understand fanaticism.
Just quickly, would I be classed as a fanatic if I disagree with the point of 9/11, the Son of the Lord? And also, can you name the ministries and present truth who are caught up in this fanaticism at this moment? Just briefly, let's just do this and I'll finish.
It's not for me to say whether you're a fanatic if you don't agree after a 15-minute presentation that I'm saying that the son-in-law was there and you say, well, I can't see it. It's not for me to label you. And with respect to all the ministries, I honestly don't know all the names of the ministries. I know...
There's some of them that's involved in it, because people there will be curious in it, so I think we just call it who they are. Ones that we know.
I'm really not sure that there's any profit in doing that, so I'm not going to do that. because I'm not sure it would benefit anybody in this room. If it would benefit people.
You are watching, and obviously there's people here, and if they're caught in fanaticism from different ministries, it would be good for you to say who these ministries are. Because it feels me out there, if I was in your presentation, and I believe what I'm saying, I'm telling people that this is the fanaticism there. I'm not just going to say it like that. I'm saying that group there, they're caught in fanaticism. But if you don't want to do it, that's not a problem.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not going to do it. Yeah, I don't know if you wait for Michael. I'm sorry.
Yes, sorry, I don't know if you've already answered it. You stated before 9/11, there was a decree, and then there's an attack. And then at midnight prayer, there's a decree, then there's an attack. And then at Sunday law, there is a decree, obviously the Sunday law, and then there's an attack. In essence, I was saying that there's 3 attacks of Islam. Is that correct?
Okay. There's a progression of it. We could call it as individual attacks, but it's just a progression. We read in Psalms 48 that it says, travail upon a woman. So even though these lines serve a purpose, but they're deceptively simplistic. So even though we mark individual things, we have to understand that this is not just discrete points in history, but it's a progression. So it progresses right up to Daniel 12:1 and into the plagues. So I don't know if I've answered your question, but yeah, we're marking 3 points. At least, there are others, but the point I wanted to make is Islam is identified at all of the major work. I didn't put Islam here, but Islam identified here as well. But I don't think I've addressed your question.
I think you've addressed it, but those 2 parts of that question. My question was, before 9/11, the decree, do we have an idea of what that decree was? And at the midnight cry, saying there's a decree for an attack, is any idea what the decree may be? We're certain of the decree in the last, at the 3rd, which is Sunday. But for the previous 2, do we have any idea what the decree is? Okay,
so I'm suggesting that at 9/11, when the threefold union is complete, that this decree here was a Sunday law decree, but it never went into effect. Whether or not it would have been initiated the blue laws, following up by Sunday law, but it's something to do with Sunday. I've already identified here at the midnight cry that the blue laws are going to start to be initiated. So at least we know one thing, that there's going to be a decree about the blue laws. So we know that. We could have some discussion, and I don't know if your kind of question is loaded or not, but we know that from 9/11 to the Sunday law, and then from the Sunday law to Daniel 12:1, this is the day of the Lord. So this is the day of the Lord, or we could rephrase it, the Lord's Day. And we know the Lord's Day is the 7th day Sabbath. So this Sunday law time period is the warfare between the Sabbath and Sunday. And we know that before the 7th day is the 6th day. And this is the day of the Lord's preparation. This is the time for us to prepare for the Sunday issue. If you go back to Genesis, we know that this was the Sabbath, and on this day here, at the beginning of the day, man was created, but the main institution that was brought to view here was marriage. Another one talks about the marriage and the Sabbath were the 2 institutions that came out of Eden, and we're seeing them typified in the day of preparation and the Lord's Day. There's a lot more that we could say on this, because the other thing that I didn't identify here is that this is identifying, I'll put it down here, when the image of the beast is going to be formed. Ellen White says that the image of the beast will be formed before the close of probation, before God's people are sealed, which is this event here. And she says it's the great test that's going to come upon God's people. If the test that comes upon God's people is a threefold test, 1, 2, 3, and 9/11 begins the testing process, and this ends the testing process, the great test that's going to happen in this time period is the image of the beast. And the definition of the image of the beast is the union of church and state, which is a symbol of the marriage. So we know here that there's going to be an image of the beast that's set up at the midnight cry, in agreement with Daniel chapter 3. So this decree that comes here, which initiates these blue laws, which initiates an attack, may well be something to do with this marriage issue. If we go back to the story of Balaam, when he rides his donkey, he was running after Balak's emissaries. He rides the donkey and he has an interaction with the donkey 3 times. The first time, because it's a donkey representing Islam, and we know that Balaam is a false prophet representing the United States. So there's an interaction between the United States and Islam. At 9/11, the donkey takes Balaam, the false prophet, off track. He was headed on a mission, and what's his mission? To come and curse and destroy God's people. And he gets taken onto a different path, which is 9/11. So here, Balaam is already contemplating the destruction of God's people, which I guess could be another line to show that there was an attack planned upon God's people, and the attack that the world wants to place upon God's people is a Sunday law. Then at the midnight cry, the second issue that he has with the donkey, he says he goes to a place where there are 2 walls. And we know that the 2 walls, because a wall is a law or a protection, the 2 laws that are given to God's people are marriage and Sabbath. So there's going to be made an attack on one of the walls here at the midnight cry. And then at the 3rd decree, the donkey speaks. And when the donkey speaks, it's after he's collapsed and taken Balaam down with him. So there's a collapse of the United States brought to view by the work of Islam, the Sunday law. There's a scene that goes on there. And here, Balaam gets his foot crushed, he becomes crippled, indicating an economic collapse. And it's brought about by the donkey or the ass banging into one of these walls. So there's a collision, if we understand a wall to be a law, in this history here. So I don't know if that addresses your question. Just to address Brother Sean's question, so he wanted me to identify particular ministries. I think it would be more profitable to perhaps identify what the controversy is over rather than identifying the names, because as far as I understand, the controversy is over literal versus symbolic. And this is the warfare that's raged in our church even before we came on the scene. If you go back to the time of Christ, this issue was raging then. Do we take things literally or symbolically? Do we take things literally or symbolically? So one of the issues that's centered around this issue of literal versus symbolic is, that's one issue. And the second issue is in the book of Joel, when it talks about the locusts. Do the locusts represent Islam, or do they represent Rome, the king of the north? Now, this might appear to be, just a theological argument, but if you're familiar with this history here, 1798, and you've read Uriah Smith's book, Daniel and the Revelation, then you'll know that there was a controversy between Uriah Smith and James White over this verse, Daniel 11 verse 40. Because in Daniel 11 verse 40, you have the king of the south and the king of the north. And without getting into the intricacies of it, Uriah Smith develops an argument, and he says that this power here, which we understand to be Rome, he represented that to be who? Do we know? Turkey. And what religion is Turkey? Islam. So at the beginning of Adventism, there's a theological warfare, a struggle between a symbol that's given in Scripture of whether it's Rome or whether it's Islam. And at the end of Adventism, in the time period in which we are, we have a similar argument in the book of Joel. Does this symbology represent Islam or Rome? So they're the two major arguments. There is a third one, if you want to put that there, which is about evangelism. Should we be doing public evangelism? Should we be going out to the people outside of the church and evangelizing to them? And I think that was clearly addressed in Sabbath school when Ezekiel chapter 2 and 3 was read. And I think this group here has a good understanding of that we shouldn't be entering into public evangelism during this time period here, the Tarian time. So the main arguments are things literal or symbolic, and in the book of Joel, are we turning things upside down, repeating the history of the foundation of this message at the time of the end. And if you're not familiar with this argument about literal and symbolic, it centers around the issue of the towers. When the towers are mentioned in the book of Isaiah and Zechariah, are these towers that identify they're literal or symbolic. So that's what the there is over. If you're interested to understand who and what is saying, whatever they're saying, to identify this issue over fanaticism.
Right. I've got three questions. The first is linked to what was said this morning about the leadership structure, leadership of the church, and I think you made a statement that approximately 10 years ago, the leadership of the church was bypassed. And I just want to understand that a bit more as to what you actually meant.
Okay, I'll answer that one straight away. At 9/11, the leadership of the church had been bypassed, which I understand to be in agreement with the reform line. The easiest way to see that is in the reform line of Christ. When, just at the baptism here, at the empowerment of the first angel's message, there's an interaction between the leadership and John the Baptist, and they ask, who gives you authority, because you didn't get it from us. And he says, I don't need your authority. It's already marking that they've been bypassed. He calls them the sons of Satan. He says, you're a generation of vipers. A few chapters later, when he's put in prison, Christ reiterates this point. He says the same thing in Matthew 23, but in Matthew chapter 10, verse 6, he sends his disciples out. He says, I am sending you to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. And they're lost because, according to Jeremiah, they've been scattered by the pastors. And in Jeremiah it says, I'm going to sack you and I'm going to appoint pastors of my own calling. So I see fulfillment of that directly in Matthew 10:6, but it occurred right here. This is the point where Saul, the king of Israel, visits the witch of Endor, enters into spiritualism, like our church did at 9/11, and they're now bypassed. You see it even at the time of the end when Christ is born. Ellen White in Desire of Ages says, because the leadership would not accept their responsibility, the Lord bypassed them and gave the message of his birth at the beginning. So you see that the leadership are going through a testing process here, which is complete by this stage, and now they're no longer God's people. I'll give another reference for that. When God is breaking a covenant with one group of people, he enters into covenant with a new group of people. At this event here, he's breaking covenant with Protestant America, and he's entering into covenant with the Millerites. This event here is the same event here, and here he's breaking covenant with the leadership of this church, and he's now selecting new leaders, who I understand are the people that are on this message, who I understand to be the priests who are going to be used to do a great work imminently in our church and call out thousands in this time period. So this few number of us are going to be doing a great work imminently, and maybe we're already transitioning to that stage now.
The Levites are the church.
Right. The other statement, you said that we can expect a tarrying time, disappointment, and shut door. I wanted some more information on that, especially the disappointment.
Okay, so we identify in this time period from here to here that this is the tarrying time for the Millerites, and we understand what tarrying time means, that they no longer have any direction on time, so they have to wait for information from the Lord. It begins in July and is really in force in August, and then from this stage on it goes as wildfire, and many, many thousands of people accept it. They're greatly disappointed because all their hopes and dreams have come to naught. So I'm identifying these characteristics come here, and we're in the tarrying time now. But when we came into the tarrying time, there's a difference between us and them. They identified their tarrying time at the beginning of their tarrying time, and we've identified our tarrying time at the end. I don't think many of us, there may have been a few, had any clarity that we are in a tarrying time. It's not that we weren't expecting one, but we didn't have, I don't think we had the details to lay it out in a clear fashion to comprehend what that was. So our tarrying time has come at the end, and I would suggest our disappointment has as well. And in reference to what Sean was saying earlier, I've got it out now, regarding this fanaticism, I think the struggle, the warfare that's gone on is disappointing to everybody, regardless of the rights and wrongs of it.
Yes, okay, the final question I had, I was very interested in what you had to say about the symbolism to do with the 120 days and the 70 days. And you said that the 70 days, we're still in the 70 days, is that?
We're still in the time period of 120. I suggested that July the 20th was June 2014, thereabouts, sometime last year. The reason I identified June is because there was a prophet school where this information was laid out pretty clearly, and that's in the time period of 120. It's the midnight cry here that would mark when the 70 come on the scene, and this would identify when the image of the beast is set up here. So we're not in the time period of the 70 yet,
Okay.
but we're close to it.
Right, so how do you know, because obviously you were able to show from Esther a very literal fulfillment of this, and I know we don't set time on things, because we shouldn't be doing that at this stage, but obviously you're saying we're towards the end of this 120, how do you know that?
Sorry, how do I know we're near the end?
Yeah.
Ellen White says, this is just a really basic answer, that the midnight cry, which was the empowerment of the second angel's message, he said it occurred near the end of the second angel. So just from that you can see that it's going to be at the back end. There are other ways of identifying that, and I alluded to it in the issue of the marriage, maybe the issue of the relationship between men and women that's occurring in the glorious land, outside the church and inside the church, which are symbolic of the image of the beast. Maybe they're all inside us that we're just about to head. But one thing we do understand, the everlasting gospel is a development and then a demonstration. By the time you get to the third waymark, by the time you get to the third, it's a shut door. It's not any time to develop character. And even though I haven't directly mentioned it here, because I've identified the difference between the priests and the Levites, if you can accept this concept of wheels upon wheels, where you've got a 1, 2 and a 3, and then we've got a wheel within that which is a 1, 2 and a 3, and another wheel, a 1, 2 and a 3. But in this history here, I've laid it out here that you've got a group of priests and Levites, and someone asked the question who the Levites are. The Levites are SDAs, and the priests are SDAs, because we're the first group of God. Then the 120 is going to be made up by the midnight cry. So we would expect to see a 1, a 2 and a 3, and then we'd expect to see a 1, a 2 and a 3. And we've already spoken about living testimony. This will be the test, the visual test, that people are going to identify these 70. They're going to see the living testimony in these priests, and this is what's going to draw them out. The living testimony begins here, but we're marking it in a 3-step testing process. So we're not in the 70, and we're in the testing process of the 1, 2, 3. We're coming up to the midnight cry, which is our 3rd test. So when the test happens, probation closes for the priests. They're still going to have to do some, demonstrate their character. There's still a work for them to do. But they've been sealed, their work, they're sealed by that stage.
But these guys are SDAs.
The priests are SDAs, the Levites are SDAs. We're the first fruit. Judgment begins in the house of God first, and then the world.
Just a quick question to you. You're at work, and this is the guys that speak with you regarding truths, Islam and everything. And they open a forum, not certain evidence, open a forum, there's about 40 of them there. Would you go there and do public evangelism, or would you tell them no?
So can you give the name again? Is this like an online forum?
No.
And it's nothing at work?
You're in Wales, and
Yeah.
a couple of neighbours, they're not Adventists, they're talking to you, they're talking about this message, and they open up a meeting house and say, come there.
And do what?
They want to know about this message.
Okay.
That's public evangelism. Would you not do that?
I don't believe that's public evangelism. No, we're in that dynamic already in Wales. We have at least one family who are not Adventists. We don't pull back on the way that we speak about the message. We speak about the message as we're speaking it now to our brothers who are on the message, and the families in attendance have been in attendance at our meeting group for coming up to a year now, and they listen, they enjoy, and they learn. If they come and ask questions, if they desire extra studies, we give them, but we're not proactively looking for them.
I understand that.
It's
I'm just saying that an opportunity opened up and there's about 40 people.
If they're calling you to come and teach them, then yeah, we don't have a response. We don't have a right to say, if someone says, teach me about Christ, to say no. But what we're talking about is fishing for men. That's how I'm identifying public evangelism.
Okay.
Fishing for men, not accepting the call of men.
I have 2 questions. The first one is to do with midnight cry. So with the midnight cry placing between 9/11 and Sunday for us.
Midnight cry is between
9/11 and Sunday.
No. The midnight cry is between August the 15th and...
For us. I'm sure you just placed it 9/11 between 9/11 and Sunday. So that's not a question, I'm just...
Okay, if I said that, I might have said something wrong.
The line on the bottom, between 9/11... No, the other line on the bottom.
This one?
Yeah.
9/11. 9/11.
And then you have midnight...
Midnight cry.
Midnight cry.
Sunday law.
So the midnight cry is in the middle, right?
Yeah. 9/11, midnight cry, Sunday law.
Yeah, so midnight cry is in the middle between 9/11.
There's the midnight cry.
Yeah. So that's paralleling the midnight cry for the Millerites.
That midnight cry here So I'll put it here. The midnight cry here is the first day of the 5th month, which is August the 15th, 1840. So parallels Millerite history, yeah.
Yes, okay, so that was just clarification. So my question is, because obviously my question is in regards to the two histories in your testimony to the Millerites that you've been doing and what you mentioned in the morning, Moses and Christ. So I'm going to take Christ and the Millerite. In the time of the Millerites, the midnight cry was in regards to them expecting Christ. So the midnight cry was all about, behold, the bridegroom cometh, going out to meet him.
Okay.
Yeah. So that movement, that experience, and that event was based upon the prophecy of 2,300 days, and also the experience of expecting Christ. The same parallel you see in the time of Christ, when you see the triumphal entry, which parallels the midnight cry.
Yes.
Yeah. Their prophecy, which is based upon the event, is based upon Daniel 9, 24, the 70 weeks. And that event is based upon them expecting Christ to come the way they thought he would come, which is Christ is coming as a king. So these two experiences, both the disciples and the Millerites are expecting Christ. Excuse me. And therefore, their experience in that event is based upon a coming of Christ. So my question is, in this midnight cry, between 9/11 and Sunday Lord, where are we expecting Christ? And what prophecy is that based upon in that event?
So what we're expecting is not Christ, but the Sunday Lord. So we're not expecting, when we draw out those histories, if you would identify October 22nd that they're expecting Christ, we could use that phraseology, but we could use a different phraseology, that they were saying judgment's about to happen, or they could say the earth is about to be cleansed. So it's not directly that Christ is going to come there, because there's other phraseologies that we could use which may be more relevant to the phraseology that we might use, that we're saying here that there's going to be a closed door. Because at least on one level, the Millerites are saying here, everything's about to close up. Now they're going to attach the coming of Christ with that, but they're saying here, this is a shut door because the earth is about to be destroyed. And so we're saying a similar thing here.
But you would need, I understand what you're saying in regards to judgment, but what move, you made a good point in regards to the earlier, in regards to it's an event as well as an experience. So it's not just an experience of accepting Christ, it's also an event which they experience, in what experience they go through in that event. So yeah, that was just to answer the question.
Okay.
In that sense, I just wanted to see how you fought through the experience of Christ and expecting him with that event. So yeah, you've asked that question. The second question would be the horn in 9/11, and also, so it's the moral fall and the fall of the state.
Yeah.
So you have a church and a state fall. Correct me if I'm wrong, you place one in 1844, the moral fall, where Sister White says, and the second one in 9/11, which is the state.
Yeah.
How do you marry it with the statement and the Bible where Sister White and John brings out that the complete moral fall is at Sunday Law for the Protestant churches, which is the overall cleansing?
I guess you're asking in a different way the same question that Sean asked, that how do you prove that there's a Sunday Law here? So what I'm factoring in is that the kings of the earth had got everything ready for a Sunday Law, and the way Ellen White phrases it, I think in early writings, where God looks and everything's about to be shut down, and he sees a small group of people unprepared and unready, and he says, stop everything, put the brakes on, because we need to sort my people out. So there's this extra factor in that's brought here, that when everything's about to kick off, he said you need to put a halt on it, and then we've got this period here of tarrying and waiting, where it's going to come to its completion here.
Yeah, I follow that, because obviously not obviously, but in 9/11, Revelation 7 comes to play, where Christ in early writing says, my blood, my blood.
Yes.
So you see a restraint, but that doesn't mean that you're not saying there was a Sunday law, but you're saying they was going to, which is a different plan.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm saying that they've got everything ready to come and destroy. A Sunday law is not just an issue of a law, it's a destruction upon God's people, because they want to come and destroy the host and the sanctuary. So this destruction, this Sunday law, is not just about making some kind of arbitrary, it's an attack upon God's people. So when I read Psalms 48 and they viewed Jerusalem, they said, come, let's get Jerusalem, and the east wind stops them. I'm saying here, they wanted to come and destroy us. And I see a Sunday law as another way of expressing the fact that let's come and destroy Jerusalem.
I think what I'm trying to get at is the difference between saying there was going to be a Sunday law or saying that the state has now fallen at that corner. The church and the state has fallen, because obviously we know Daniel 11 verse 41 identifies that next stage of the King of the North entering into the glorious land. That's Sunday law.
Because we want to, and I don't want to push the issue and saying that I'm right and everyone's wrong, but in our mind, we've got those verses and we've done what I've done here, made them sticks. So when we talk about verse 40, we say it's exclusively, strictly, right here. So if that was the case, Sunday law, Sunday, yeah, right here, this is 41, yeah? That's what you're saying. So is this where you see the threefold union happening?
It's before. The threefold union is a progressive.
So where would you identify where the threefold union begins, or is fully formed?
From where it begins.
Which is
1989.
So I would identify it, according to Revelation 18 verse 2, as being here, because if we're going to say it begins here, by here it's already fully formed. So if there's a progression, I think you'll take the progression up to here, but I'm taking it up to here, but I'm using Revelation 18 verse 2 and 3 to show that it has to happen here, which is a way before there. So if it happened here, so Babylon is fallen, the threefold union is fully formed here. I don't know if you would agree that I have license to pull in when the kings want to come and destroy Jerusalem as being this event and not this event. Because I've just pulled the threefold union from here, which is, you're going to say Daniel 11 verse 41, and I'm pulling it back to here. I'm saying Daniel 11 verse 41 is not a single event, it's a progressive event, beginning here, where the papacy entered America, completed here, where America is going to speak like a dragon. It's not just when the Sunday law happens, because if the threefold union was formed here, and Revelation 18 verse 2 and 3 says it did, then the papacy has already entered the USA right here. So verse 41 would have to be some kind of progressive event, but I know the way we express it, and I'm not undoing the way we express 41 to say it's there. I'm not trying to say that's wrong, but all I'm just showing is that there is some progression.
There is, yeah, I understand what you're saying. I suppose it's just different semantics. Obviously, verse 41 we identify him entering as the Sunday law because of the way he comes and enters into the countries in verse 40.
Yeah.
So the way he enters into the countries in verse 40, he overflows and passes over. That entering has to be the same as verse 41. So there cannot be no Sunday law that passes and yet he's entered into the...
I'm not trying to undo that.
In regards to the progression, I understand what you're saying in the reasoning. For me, it's just I don't want to get too much into it because this is always supposed to be a question. It's regards to the cleanses and it's in regards to the fall of Babylon. Babylon was fallen. Because the midnight cry...
Can I just address that?
Yeah, sure.
Are you asking where Revelation 18 verse 2 and 3 occurred? Because I don't know if that's the question you're asking, because according to Life 54:11, it occurs right here, so we already know the answer. I'm not making that one, I'm not doing. But I'm just laying out what inspiration teaches. So Babylon has fallen occurs right here, according to 18 verse 2, so we know that. So what we have to do is understand what that means. And if we're going to use the understanding that 1141 occurs here, and I'm not arguing that it doesn't, then we have to now factor in that 18 verse 2 is here. Because 3 years ago, we were having this discussion, and we said, well, when does verse 2 happen? I don't think we'd have the clarity that we're having now. We wouldn't be discussing this. We'd be saying, we don't know, but it's probably going to be here. And what I'm suggesting is, according to the passage that I read in Manuscript 136, we're trying to push everything. I'm not saying you're doing that, but God's people are trying to get all of this stuff and push it into the future when it's already occurred. Now we understand that in the terms of the reference of 1989 and 9/11, and we see the Adventist Church doing that. But when that same challenge is faced by us, when I'm suggesting that actually Babylon fell here, not here, it's a past event, and that's maybe challenging to some of us. So we're facing the same philosophical challenges we're telling the rest of the church to follow, that if it does fall here, how does that change the way we see things?
I suppose it's more because it has to fall at Sunday law as well. So if you was to say, and it's semantic, if you was to say it's begun to fall at 9/11, in my mind it's different than saying it has fallen at 9/11.
Okay,
You see what I mean?
What I'm doing is I'm not trying to explain and try and justify what I'm saying. It seems to me, if I'm reading like Scriptures 4:11, it says, when the great buildings fall and the turning and overturning of God's hand, Revelation 18 verses 1 to 3 will be fulfilled. To my understanding, fulfilled means it's happened. When Christ says the time is fulfilled in his ministry, he's referring you back to the baptism. He's not referring you back to some intermediate stage. He's referring you back to a point in time, a specific prophetic history. So when it says 18 verse 2 and 3, it says it's fulfilled here. That's not a progression. It happens by here. You might have had some progression before that, but it's already happened here. And so if we want to explain what happens between here and here, and we're going to put down in 1141 here, that's all good and well, but we can't make the fall of Babylon, 18 verse 2, Babylon is fallen, and make that a progressive event, because it fell right here. Just as it did in this history. We wouldn't say that Babylon fell, the Protestant churches fell here or here progressively. We mark it at a point in time when they rejected the message. So I'm using the same idea in this history, and I'm not arguing that it challenges the way we understand things, but that's the same challenge that we're offering other people.
Well, all right, I'll make 2 points and I'll let other people, because I want to ask questions or something. First of all, and obviously I'm not coming at you, it's just my understanding, and that's why I'm asking questions. When you quoted the live sketches, my understanding is that when she quotes Revelation 18, verses 1 to 3, she quotes it in context. Yes, she mentions the towers falling, but after she says that, she says, when he rises to shake terribly the earth, then the Revelation 18 verses 1 to 3 will be fulfilled.
So where are you going to mark that?
I don't mark it, Sister White marks it Sunday, when he rises to shake terribly the earth.
No, when I mean where you mark that, so you're going to mark the shaking of the earth at Sunday law.
That's what Sister White marks it.
Okay, so I guess, so to respond to that, I guess it's going to depend on how we read.
Exactly, and that's what I'm saying. Are you basing that fall? Because you didn't use that to base the fall of 9/11 on that. You just mentioned it now. So all I wanted to know is why are you identifying the fall of Babylon at 9/11?
Because it's based upon my reading of that. But if we did what you said, and we put it here, okay, then are you saying that Revelation 18 verses 1, 2, 3 and 4 all occur at the same time?
No.
When does verse 4 occur?
The loud cry.
The loud cry begins here.
Mm-hmm.
So the loud cry, so verse 4 would be here,
okay.
Because the loud cry is not, this is what I said before, we mark these as points, but the loud cry begins
I
here.
agree.
So you're going to mark verse 4 here, and then you've also said that if you're going to say shake terribly the earth, and use that as a Sunday law, then you're going to make verses 1, 2, and 3. So you make all of those verses all occur future to the history that we're in, and I'm suggesting.
No, I wouldn't do that.
But where would you put verses 1, 2, and 3 then?
Where you put it, but not for the same reason. That's what I'm asking you.
I thought you said that you placed them at Sunday law.
No, I place Sister White places when he arises to shake terribly the earth at Sunday law. If you use that quote, that's what I'm saying.
Okay, so what we're disagreeing on is when the buildings came down, was that the Lord shaking terribly the earth or not? So I guess
Exactly.
I'm not sure if that has any. Does that have any direct bearing that Revelation 18 verses 1, 2, and 3 occurred here? You still agreeing with that?
Mm-hmm.
So if that's still the case, then we know Babylon fell right here. So we're back to square one.
No, because it's not for you, yes, but not for me. Because alright, if I read this quote and then I'll time's up. But so this is Great Controversy 389 paragraph 2. Great Controversy 389 paragraph 2. And I'll pick up from the middle. It says, but the message of the second angel did not reach its complete fulfillment in 1844. The churches then experienced a moral fall in consequence of their refusal of the light of the Advent message. But that fall was not complete. As they have continued to reject the special truths for this time, they have fallen lower and lower. Not yet, however, can it be said that Babylon is fallen, because she made the nation drink of the wine of the wrath of her fornication. She has not yet made the nation do this. The spirit of world conforming and indifference to the testing truth for our time exists and has been gaining ground in churches of the Protestant faith in all the countries of Christendom. And these churches are included in the solemn terrible denunciation of the second angel. But the work of apostasy has not yet reached its culmination. The reason why I'm reading this is to identify, and there's many others, to show that the fall of Babylon is progressive.
Okay, so when you identify the fall of Babylon being progressive, you want to identify it as lots of little increments.
Not me.
Okay.
It's just the way.
You're reading of that. I'm interpreting it this way. That the United States is a two-horned beast, and it's going to be brought down in 2 steps. So when it reads a progressive fall, it attached the first fall to the second angel's message right here.
Yes.
So when the second fall happens, instead of lots of little increments, which is the way that you're reading that passage, I'm reading it as a 2-step process, because Christ cleanses his temple twice. First it's here, then the second one would be here, in agreement with the Life Sketches 4:11, because it says, the word fulfill, I understand it to mean it's now coming to history. And she says, I've got a cut down version, it says, what terrible scene will take place when the Lord shall arise to shake over the earth? Then, when he takes shake over the earth, then the words will be fulfilled. And my understanding of fulfilled, when Christ used it in his ministry, he was using it as a past event. He said, it has already been fulfilled, the time is fulfilled. And he was marking that as the baptism when he said that. The understanding of fulfilled means it's a particular way mark. It's not some progression. So when he says he's going to shake terribly the earth, I mark the shaking terribly of the earth as here, because that's when it's going to be fulfilled. Because if you don't do that, you're going to take Revelation 18 and get its fulfillment back here. And I suggest that what you're doing is pushing everything into the future.
No, okay. The fulfillment obviously is a progression where it comes to a culmination where there's a full fulfillment. And
no, what I'm saying, fulfillment is an event, and it says it was fulfilled when he's going to shake over the earth, right here, when the buildings came down in New York. 18 verses 1 to 3 was fulfilled. It's not a progressive fulfillment, it's fulfilled at that event.
Okay, yeah.
And I'm using the same way that I use it at the time of Christ, when he says the time is fulfilled. The time is fulfilled is not a progression between 27 and 31 or 34. It's the beginning of that history, which is 27. And I'm using the word fulfilled the same way here. That fulfilled is the beginning of the history, not a progression through that history. And if that is correct, it forces some philosophical changes in the way we look at this, because this is then being put here, and then it has some implications about when this horn falls, and when the horn falls, the threefold union is fully formed, and it changes the way we view things. The discussion that you and I are having now is a similar argument that we have with the church when we talk about when the latter rain is being poured out, because everybody believes the latter rain is being poured out here, and they don't see a two-step latter rain. And so people will say to us, it all depends upon the semantics and how you read these issues and what she means by certain phrases that she speaks of. So it shouldn't be a surprise that we're wrestling over these issues because they're new to us.
Yeah, I would say that this is probably not a good forum to discuss it properly, but in 18, because of the time, I mean, in Revelation 18, yes, I believe in Revelation 18, the angel came down, 9/11. So it's for understanding why do I believe that's there, and yet at the same time, America, well, where it says in last day events, when do her sins reach unto heaven? Revelation 18, 2-5 is quoted. It says, when the law of God is finally made void by legislation.
Okay, so this is the point I was making is it's fulfilled here, but God restrains America, restrains the threefold union from doing what they want to do, which is destroy Jerusalem. So there's going to be, from this point to this point, a progression. There's going to be this progression that it starts here, and it's going to try and force its way through the attacks of Islam, however way you want to conceptualize that here it's going to speak. So I agree in the level of this progression, but the threefold union is fully formed here, but it's not fully manifested until here. But the way Ellen White writes it, she writes it as a kind of a singular one-off event, and the thing that modifies that, I'm not saying we're modifying spirit prophecy, but the main we need to understand that is Revelation 7. Because in Revelation 7, there's this restraint that's been put upon America, the world. Why? Why is God restraining them? Because his people are not ready. We read in Ezra that the priests were ready, but the Levites aren't. So there's a large cohort of God's people who are not ready at 9/11, and God cannot allow the events to happen as they, I don't want to say should have happened, but logically they should have happened. Because the vast majority of these people have been destroyed and go to Christ's grave. So it's in his mercy that he's going to modify things or show us some intricacies of what's going on between these events. And it's for us to kind of conceptualize and then verbalize how we get Babylon is fallen here and how we get to the speaking of it there. But there are so many examples of that, because when Balaam, I said, takes the ass, he goes through 3 steps before the ass completely annihilates Balaam. First he takes him out of the way, then he crushes his foot, and then he collapses him. So we can see this progression. And Psalms 48 said, it's as a woman in travail, the pain that the east wind is going to bring upon it. It's a progressive punishment, because there's a progressive escalation in its attack, in the threefold union's attack, Babylon's attack upon God's people. It begins here when the union's formed, and then gets progressively worse when it speaks. So I'm not undoing, I don't believe, what we currently understand about the importance of this event. What's new is that things happen in a serious way here, and that there's these 2 groups. We can identify who the 2 groups are, how they're operating in the relationship between them, and specific events that occur based upon these numbers. Time's up. We finally got the message. Let's pray.